Welcome to Tulsa World Opinion. Each week, we will highlight something that we either wrote this past week or will be writing in the upcoming weekend to explain a little bit about more of the editorial board's position and what we write about. So I am Ginnie Graham, the editorial's editor, and
I'm Bob Doucette. I'm an editorials writer.
And this Sunday on December 12th, we are writing an editorial about Senator Lankford joining a group of Republican lawmakers in a letter that they sent to the DoD Secretary Lloyd Adams. And in it, they expressed concern about the Pentagon's Countering Extremism Working Group. And there was a report, an ongoing, from what I understand, investigation into what's leading to extremism in our country. And to me, this brings up domestic terrorism, that we see a rise in this. It's whether it's polarization or anger, but something's radicalizing people. And the letter was couched in the criticism of this working group based on free speech or wokeness, whatever you want to call it. But I look at it differently, and I look at it as there's anger popping up in school boards. There's anger popping up at city councils that bordering on violence and danger. And that's what when we talk about this January 6th insurrection, that's where this came from. And so this news report was written by, I want to give credit to Tulsa World reporter Randy Crable, but as an editorial board, it concerns us that our senator and other Republicans are making this a political issue when it's really about, I think, a national security issue. So, but Bob took the lead on actual writing the editorial, and he read the letter. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts when you read the letter? What did you think of it at the time?
You know, looking at it, it's written in a way that is trying to do two things at once. It's trying to sound reasonable, as in, like, you know, we understand that there are security issues. We want you to take care of that. And then it starts going into this language of, you know, not wanting the military to be subject to adhering to leftist, woke, whatever, you know, kind of using all of these terms that are kind of big right now in the right in terms of what they're trying to fight. So the strange thing about it to me is anybody who voted for the bill in which this is authorized, they should know this. And this is something that Senator Lankford actually voted for. He approved voting for this passing the Senate. And then when then President Trump overrode or vetoed the bill, he voted to override along with the vast majority of the rest of the Senate, you know, both sides, both parties. So this isn't something that is new or caught anybody by surprise. This is something that they've known about, and they knew the Pentagon was going to be working on this because the Pentagon has been trying to combat what you call ill elements within the military ranks for a long time, whether it's organized crime, you know, gang stuff, harassment issues and things like that. These are things that they look into, and what they've seen with extremism is this is becoming a bigger problem. You know, we have 5 people who are either active military or National Guard members were among the people who were arrested and charged in January 6th riots. And you've got a bunch of other people beyond that, you know, many more people who were veterans that were involved in that. And that kind of told the Pentagon that we've got a problem here. So I think what the senators are trying to get at is they don't want this to be some kind of a big brother thing that's going against conservatives. But they're telling this to an institution, and this isn't really in our editorial, but I'll just go ahead and come out and say it. They're doing this in an institution that we know is fairly conservative by nature when you're talking about the United States military. If they're going after extremism, that's not the same thing as trying to, you know, counter conservatism. That's not what's going on. Those two are not the same things at all. So
And I think you make it, and the editorial makes a point that the vast majority of the military is not radicalized. They're not, I mean,
Right.
we're talking about, a small group. But I think the thing that came up in my mind was, 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing, all the conspirators were, the two main ones, and then their third one, they all came from the military. Not that the military caused the radicalization, but something, was targeting them. And we're seeing that in the national reporting from the insurrection is showing that it's not so much active military that is a concern, but they're finding a lot more veterans were, involved. And I think it's worth kind of bringing up, like, why, where is that pull for violence? Because we're not talking about speech. We're talking about people who will bring a gun to a government building with the intention of harm, or gun to, or a bomb at a building. So, I see that so much that, everyone, at what point, and this gets at what point is speech turn into, more than that. And I think that's what people are concerned with. But right now we're just seeing more and more violent actions that I think we have. I mean, that's why I'm backing the idea of this working group. So, and it's not just military for me. I mean, go to school boards, go to, city council meetings, and people are feeling, I don't know, a little more emboldened to, walk that line of an attack. And I think that public officials are feeling that.
Sure. And with the working group, what they're really hoping to do too is they want to nip this in the bud. They want to stop this stuff before it becomes a larger problem. So what they've seen since so far here in 2021 is not quite almost 300 instances of reports of extremism, and various actions have been taken to take a look at those things, investigate them, and so forth. But all they're really trying to do with the working group right now, it's not even so much about, we're going to come down hard on these people, or here's the things you can or cannot say. All they're trying to do is figure out a way to go across all of the branches of the military to where everyone is reporting and using the same kind of data that they're collecting on this. So it may be the data collection that some of these senators are objecting to, but the wider problem is that if you have, say in the beginning of 2021, enough people that are starting to be, like you said, emboldened to use force, or to help plan to use force, or both, what's it going to look the next time around if people are more angry? When does it start to become a more acceptable thing for people within the military to believe that, hey, we're just going to do this? And that presents a really huge problem, something that the military doesn't want any part of. The spirit of the military is one that it does not get involved in domestic politics. And it's one of those things where the military's purpose is to protect the country. So when they see this kind of activity, it's not that they're even trying to curtail what people's speech is. Like you said, they are actually after people who are radicalized. And that doesn't have to be a radicalization of, supporting this person or supporting that movement or anything else. Violent radicalism is, extremism. That's what they're trying to prevent. So to come back on this particular working group seems kind of, to me anyway, this seems more like in advance of an election year. Midterms are coming up, and everyone's starting to bark out these talking points wherever they can. Because like you said, they were doing it about the school board stuff with DOJ. This letter to the Pentagon chief is no different. Just a few different words, few different targets of, what they're trying to, who they're trying to talk to. but the message is the same. We're trying to fight wokeism. We're trying to fight socialism. We don't want this people who are against that stuff to feel like they're being silenced. And none of that is being silenced. It's more of a thing of they just don't want to see another instance where they have people who wear the uniform involved in something like what we saw on January 6th or something potentially worse like we saw in Oklahoma City.
You know, when we do these editorials, I don't know about you, but I ended up going down these rabbit holes of research that you start with a letter and you go, and I came across this, it was on a military.com article, and they were quoting a person by the name of Christopher Goldsmith, who had started this firm, Sparvarius, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But he looked at, and it's a firm that analyzes domestic attacks, domestic terrorism attacks. And one of the things he was finding is that there's certainly this element of that online algorithms that I know that we've written about before, you've written about before specifically, that veterans tend to be targeted with disinformation. So the military and veterans are not any more susceptible to disinformation, to being radicalized than you or me, but it's more about how maybe they are targeted. And this particular veterans theory is that it's because they are, they have social power that people, we have a great respect for our military, and a lot of the military members come out and they are leaders in their community, and that they're trained. And so people who are, these bad actors in our world are targeting disinformation to maybe some of our veterans. And I found that interesting, that it's beyond getting to the why. Like, why are we seeing more people wanting to harm our government? Why are we seeing people wanting to take arms up against public officials? And I just found that to be an interesting theory, and also kind of showing that, I just don't think it's just about the military. When I think about domestic terrorism, I think it's even broader. But if there are some trends, and this working group is finding that, then I think that's important work that I hope in an election year just doesn't get lost. So
no doubt.
Yeah. So anyway, that is coming up Sunday, and I hope everybody reads it. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Give it a few beats. What do you think about talking about just the idea of reading the opinion page? I mean, I threw that out there just as a topic of people who get mad that we're so biased and explaining why we're biased. I mean, what do you think of that?
Well, I've battled with this a little bit myself. So in fact, today it was kind of funny because someone on Twitter was coming at me about a column I wrote for this Sunday's paper. And I was kind of like, okay, well, that's an interesting take, but thank you very much. There's that division.
Are there some examples of letters that you might be able to, do you get feedback in letters lately that people don't know what they're talking about?
Oh yeah, sure. That
on this particular thing. Well, why don't we try it and just see where it goes? And I don't really have an example to use, but we'll just kind of ask questions and throw it back and forth and see what happens.
All right then.
All right. Hi, this is the Tulsa World Opinion video and podcast, and we are this time going to dive into just a topic that we were discussing a little bit, which is how to read the op-ed page or the opinion page. And part of this gets to the argument that a lot of people have been having with others and themselves about the idea of biased or unbiased news, facts, not facts. And where we're coming from is news versus opinion, and the blurring of that. And one of the things that, let's start over.
Go for it.
Because I forgot to introduce ourselves. Okay, Patrick Prince, cut all that out. All right, let's try it again. Welcome to the Tulsa World Opinion Podcast and Video. I am Ginnie Graham, the editorials editor, and
I'm Bob Doucette, editorials writer.
And we thought we would talk a little bit about this notion of, as I call it, how to read the opinion section. But what I'm really talking about is the difference between news and opinion. And this comes up when people want, unbiased news or just the facts. And then where do we come into that with opinion? And so one of my favorite things that not favorite things, but I sort of laugh about, is I will share something like a column or an editorial, and we'll just get blasted for, why are you so biased? This is biased. And I usually return, well, yes, that's why it says opinion at the top. So for me, one of the things that I want to point out is opinion doesn't mean that we ignore facts. It means that we look at facts, but then from that, we can have a take or analyze something beyond that. And so I was going to ask, for Bob, Bob has been writing opinions now for how many months?
2 or 3, something like that.
2 or 3. So coming from a longtime news reporter coming over into opinion, what do you see as the challenge as an opinion writer in sort of explaining what you did as news and what you're now doing as opinion?
Well, I'd say with reporting, it's pretty much you're just playing it straight. You're going to go out and you're going to get information, you're talking to people, and you're putting that information together in a coherent way, fair, accurate, clear as you can, but you're not taking a side. That's the goal all the way around, is you are paid to go get information and put it and get it ready for publication. If I was to describe what we do on the opinion page, is we are paid to analyze current events. So it's not even so much of being, a newspaper's hot take artists, because that's not really what we do. But we are trying to look at the information that we gather and maybe call some balls and strikes here. Here's what's going on. Here's what we think could be done better, or here's what's going well, based on facts, based on the reality on the ground. We're not just trying to make this stuff up. We are trying to give you good information, but also using the experiences that we've had in viewing the world to paint that picture. So, and the great thing about it is with opinion is it does invite, just like a news story does, but maybe even more so, it does invite people to respond. It's okay if people disagree with what I say. That's fine. And if someone comes back at me with a reasonable argument, say what I've published is not right or something like that, hey, I'm ready for a mea culpa. That's fine. But it is just like you said, we are probably going to have a take or an opinion or a view that is going to have very personal reasonings behind it. Some people want to call that a bias or whatever and stuff like that. And I think what it's more like is it's just a viewpoint. A story that you see in the news section, it's not a viewpoint, it's information, fact-based information. What you're seeing on the opinion page is a fact-based viewpoint or analysis of something that's going on. Sometimes we're pretty serious and sometimes maybe not quite as serious. So,
right. And sometimes people need to understand that, because we both have experience in news, almost, I think 20 years for me, or a little more than 20 years, and it's same for you. Just because they're writing the news story doesn't mean they're biased. It means that this is information that's happening. You might not like the information that's happening, but just because they're writing about it doesn't mean there's a bias either way. But when we look at editorials or things that we read might inspire a column because, whatever, we see maybe other information from others, we have the latitude to go beyond that. I did want to take a moment for people who are watching or listening to explain what's on the opinion page, because we have editorials that represent a board. And we do have at the Tulsa World a board of 7 people, and that might go up here in the next year. But the board is made up of the newsroom's leadership and the company president. And those are the pieces that run on the left side of the page. And when we put them online, they say editorial, and they're unsigned and they represent what the board has agreed to. And sometimes we don't agree. Sometimes we have to find the common ground, which I find interesting that I might be for something, someone else might be against it, but in order for us to make a comment on behalf of the institution, we have to find common ground. And I always think that if more of our elected leaders would look at the world like that, that we'd probably get more done, because we can disagree on certain things, but then try to find something that where we intersect. But the other things on the page are our columns. Bob and I write at least one column a week. Often they're serious, they're a take on news. Sometimes I say I just write goofy things, like I'll write about my family or an experience, and that's just because that's almost like how I'm feeling at the time. But I describe what we do as local columnists, that we're commenting on local things or ourselves. So other columnists might be just humor or political, but what we do is sort of general. And then we have, of course, a cartoon, which is syndicated. And then we have letters. And I think letters is where that's where anyone can write a letter. I mean, we have some guidelines. You can't compare every person to Hitler. We're not going to allow that. That's not, but that's where we hope that people will bring their perspective and bring their thoughts. So if they disagree with us, they can say, Ginnie wasn't right on this. Her take on, contraception in schools misses this, and that's fine. We do ask, but what I like about letters, and this goes across all newspapers, we require a name and a city of residence and a way to contact them to verify they are a real person. Because I think the anonymity of the Wild West of social media has just allowed people to be mean and say crazy, wrong information. And that when the letters, I think we have a higher standard, and I think it adds to the community in engagement. So, and Bob right now is the letters editor. And so you handle a lot of those. What is your take on the letter so far? Because you've been doing it for about, I don't know, almost 4 months. Have you gotten to know the letter writers yet?
Yeah. Some of these letter writers are repeats. They are regulars. We'll call them regulars. That's a good word for it. I think that what it tells me, there's a couple of things that I get out of it. Is the one thing it tells me is that there is an engaged group of people out there, and when they see something that they want to talk about, they're going to fire off a letter. That's great. Another thing that I see with this thing is all of those letters are highly read. Mm-hmm. People love to read those letters to the editor, and they like to comment on them. They like to share them and everything like that. So it's definitely, it makes that page, even though the letters are a little shorter than the columns and editorials, there is a sense of an equal footing that the people that are paid to write here at the Tulsa World are pretty much viewed by the readership in terms of, how many people are reading it, as no better or no worse than the letter writers. Mm-hmm. So, hey, let's go. Bring those stuff in there. You meet our guidelines, pretty good chance it's going to get in.
Right. And I tell people that I go, as long as, and the letters are 250 words, and some people think that is way too short, but it actually isn't. And I look at it as a challenge. Our editorials that run on the left side, they're sometimes 300 words. I mean, they're not much longer often. And really a good letter gets to the point. And whether you're disagreeing with us or agreeing with us, or there's just an issue in the community that you're mad about, that pothole in front of your house. It's amazing that the stuff that gets attention on our letters. I've often had people ask about the guest editorials, or also known as op-eds. I think people use those interchangeably, but we do use columns from other people. And what I'm typically looking for is an expert or some sort of unusual experience, a connection to the issue being written about. And often I'll get, someone who's just mad at the president or mad at anyone, and they just want to write a guest op-ed on that. And I have to turn them down because they're not connected to that issue. They're not working for that lawmaker or having had work there or tied to the issue, whatever it is. So just for those who are wanting to know how we choose those, that's where it starts. And those columns run about 600 words. So, and they were emailed to us directly. But I've always said, if you don't get chosen to write a column, turn it into a letter, because you do not have to be an expert to write a letter. That's where we want everyone's opinion. So,
that's
but anyway,
kind of an interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because there are some people that have written letters who are well-known names. You're just within the last few weeks, we've had a couple of people, they submitted a letter to the editor. It's like, oh wow, I know that person, and they were able to just say what they wanted to say in 250 or less, and boom, it's in.
It is. And often we'll see, like, what is the most highly read piece of the day, and it's a letter or two. So I kind of laughed one, and here I've sweat over a column, and I did all this digging, and a 250 word letter that just, and maybe it gets to the point, and it is different, that gets the most attention. So you're right. Well, is there anything else you want to add about it, Bob?
The thing that I would say is that when I got to the Tulsa World and started reading the op-ed section in the pages, honestly, it was one of my favorite parts of the paper, just because I really enjoyed the writing and I appreciated the perspectives and things like that. So doing it now is, well, one, it's a lot of fun, but it's also a challenge that I take pretty seriously, because I hope that when people read our stuff, whether it's the unsigned editorials or our columns or our letters, that they really feel like they're getting something out of it, and they're not bored with it or something like that. I really do hope that, and let us know, talk to us if we did something good. We always appreciate an attaboy, and if you think we're not doing so good, well, we'll hear from that too and find out what's wrong and go with it.
Yeah, I appreciate people reading. I'm just glad, even though they may hate what I've written, I'm just glad they're reading it. And then if they're really mad, I'll say, please write a letter. It's that's what that's for. We want to have that place in the community where we can disagree or find solutions, because within disagreements, as we found being on an editorial board, you can find solutions and find areas of agreement. And I think that just ends up making it better. So, but anyway, I encourage everyone, write a letter. So thank you very much. And until next time, bye.
For more information, you can visit tulsaworld.com.